Admiral Vexithara stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Half his fleet was gone or dying, and the humans were still coming. The primitive kinetic weapons had done what no enemy had accomplished in 200 years of Zephyrian dominance. They had broken through shields that were supposed to be unbreakable. The alien admiral quickly began issuing new orders. His remaining ships spread out to make themselves harder targets and began modulating their shield frequencies. If the human weapons worked by overwhelming the energy barriers with simple mass and velocity, then perhaps different shield configurations could deflect them. Captain Morrison watched the enemy formation change on his tactical display. The Zephyrians were adapting faster than he had hoped they would. The element of surprise was gone, and now both sides would have to fight with everything they had. "Captain, we're getting return fire from multiple ships," Lieutenant Commander Grant reported. "They're concentrating on the Vengeance." Morrison turned to see plasma bolts reaching across space toward Admiral Phillips' flagship. The UNS Vengeance was the largest ship in the human fleet, and therefore the most obvious target. Brilliant streams of superheated gas struck its hull and began eating through the armor plating. But the Vengeance kept fighting. Its railguns fired again and again, sending tungsten penetrators toward the alien ships. The Zephyrians had adjusted their shields, but the kinetic rounds still found ways through. It was like trying to stop bullets with a net made of light. Chief Engineer Rivera appeared at Morrison's side with sweat on his forehead. "Captain, we've got problems with the number 3 railgun. The magnetic coils are overheating faster than expected. 2 more shots and we might lose it completely." Morrison nodded grimly. The human weapons were effective, but they were pushing the technology to its limits. The railguns had been designed for single shots against large targets, not rapid fire against an entire fleet. They were burning out their own weapons with the intensity of their attack. "What about the other guns?" Morrison asked. "Still operational but showing stress fractures in the coil assemblies," Rivera replied. "We're asking them to do things they were never designed for." The battle continued, with both sides adapting their tactics. The humans learned to fire in sequence rather than all at once to avoid overloading their weapons. The Zephyrians began using their superior speed and maneuverability to make themselves harder targets. Then the aliens revealed their secret weapon. Admiral Vexithara deployed a squadron of small ships that Morrison had never seen before. They moved differently than normal spacecraft, seeming to bend space around themselves as they approached the human fleet. "Captain, I'm detecting massive gravitational distortions," Grant reported with alarm in her voice. "Those ships are generating artificial gravity wells." Morrison realized what was happening just as the first gravity mine activated. The small alien vessel suddenly became the center of a localized gravitational field, strong enough to crush anything that came too close. The UNS Liberty tried to avoid the trap, but was caught in the edge of the field. Morrison watched in horror as the destroyer's hull began to buckle under gravitational forces that no ship could withstand. Metal screamed as it was compressed beyond its design limits. Within seconds, the Liberty was crushed into a ball of twisted wreckage. "All ships avoid those small vessels," Morrison broadcast. "They're gravity mines designed to crush us, but the damage was already done." A second gravity mine activated near the UNS Houston and claimed another human ship. The Zephyrians had found a way to neutralize the human advantage in close-range combat by making it impossible to get close. Navigation Officer Karen. Wells looked up from her station with an expression Morrison had never seen before. Wells was a quiet woman who had spent years working asteroid mining operations before joining the military. She understood gravitational mechanics better than anyone on the ship. "Captain, I think I know how to beat those gravity mines," she said. "We can't avoid the gravity wells, but maybe we can use them." Morrison moved to her station. "Explain." Wells called up a tactical projection showing the gravitational fields around the alien mines. "The gravity wells are designed to crush ships that get too close, but they also accelerate anything that passes through them. If we fire our railguns through the gravity fields, the penetrators will gain velocity." Morrison understood immediately. The same gravitational forces that crushed ships could also accelerate projectiles to even higher speeds. Instead of avoiding the gravity wells, they could use them as natural particle accelerators. "How much additional velocity?" Morrison asked. Wells ran quick calculations. "Depending on the trajectory, maybe 10 to 15% of light speed on top of what the railguns already provide. The penetrators would hit with 3 times their normal kinetic energy." Morrison made his decision. "All ships, this is Morrison. Target your railguns through the gravity wells. Use their own weapons against them." The human fleet adjusted their firing solutions to send tungsten penetrators through the gravitational fields generated by the alien mines. The result was spectacular. Projectiles that had already been moving at a significant fraction of light speed were accelerated to even higher velocities. When the first, gravity-enhanced penetrator struck a Zephyrian cruiser, the explosion lit up half the battle area. The tungsten slug hit with the force of a small nuclear weapon, and the alien ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, and the next there was only an expanding cloud of plasma and debris. Admiral Vexithara watched two more of his ships die to their own gravity mines and realized he was facing an enemy unlike any he had encountered before. The humans took his advantages and turned them into weapons against him. They adapted faster than any species he had ever fought. The alien admiral made a desperate decision. He ordered his remaining ships to ram the human vessels. If kinetic weapons were effective, then kinetic attacks might work as well. The Zephyrian ships turned toward the human fleet and accelerated to maximum speed. It was Communications Officer Amy Thompson who spotted the new threat. "Captain, the remaining enemy ships are on collision courses. They're trying to ram us." Morrison calculated distances and velocities in his head. The alien ships were faster than human vessels, and they would reach ramming range in less than 3 minutes. But 3 minutes was enough time for one more coordinated attack. "All ships concentrate fire on the lead ship," Morrison ordered. "We stop them here or we all die together." The human fleet fired everything they had. Railguns that were already damaged from overuse sent their last penetrators through gravity wells that amplified their destructive power. The lead Zephyrian ship disappeared in a flash of light as relativistic tungsten found its reactor core. But the other alien ships kept coming. Morrison realized that Admiral Vexithara was willing to sacrifice his entire fleet to eliminate the humans. It was the kind of desperate move that spoke of an enemy who finally understood how dangerous humans could be. The next few minutes would determine whether humanity's first space battle would also be their last. The remaining Zephyrian ships closed the distance to the human fleet with deadly purpose. Admiral Vexithara had abandoned all tactical doctrine in favor of a desperate suicide charge. If his advanced weapons could not defeat these primitive humans, then he would use the oldest weapon of all mass and velocity applied, directly to enemy hulls, Captain. Morrison watched the tactical display as 3 alien cruisers approached at maximum acceleration. Their sleek hulls gleamed in the light of distant stars, and their remaining weapons continued to fire even as they prepared to ram his ships. It was the act of a commander who had been pushed beyond reason by an impossible defeat. "Time to impact?" Morrison asked. Lieutenant Commander Grant checked her calculations twice before answering. 2 minutes 30 seconds, Captain. The lead ship is targeting the Vengeance. Morrison felt a cold anger settle in his chest. Admiral Phillips had been like a father to him during his early career, and the Vengeance carried 800 crew members who had families waiting for them back on Earth. He was not going to let alien desperation destroy good people who were only trying to protect civilians. Chief Engineer Rivera appeared at his side with a damage report. "Captain, we've lost the number 3 railgun completely and number 2 is barely functional. We've got maybe 6 shots left before the magnetic coils burn out entirely." Morrison nodded. 6 shots to stop 3 ships that outmassed his vessel by a factor of 4. It would have to be enough because there was no alternative. Human ships could not outrun Zephyrian vessels, and their damaged weapons could not reload fast enough for a prolonged engagement. "What about point defense systems?" Morrison asked. Rivera looked confused. "Captain, those are for shooting down missiles, not ship-to-ship combat. The targeting computers aren't designed to track objects that large." Morrison remembered something from his early training at the Naval Academy. Sometimes the most effective weapons were the ones nobody expected you to use. Point defense systems were designed to fill space with projectiles to destroy incoming missiles, but there was no reason they could not be used against larger targets. "Weapons Officer Tony Martinez to the bridge," Morrison announced over the ship intercom. Martinez arrived within seconds. He was a young man from Texas who had grown up hunting and understood projectile weapons better than most fleet officers. His grandfather had taught him that the best way to stop a charging animal was not with one perfect shot, but with many good ones. "Tony, I need you to reprogram the point defense systems," Morrison said. "Instead of firing at missiles, I want them to fire at the space between us and those alien ships." Martinez understood immediately. "Create a debris field, Captain. Make them fly through a wall of metal." "Exactly. Can you do it?" "Give me 2 minutes and I'll turn our point defense into the galaxy's biggest shotgun," Martinez replied with a grin. Morrison activated the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Morrison. Prepare point defense systems for anti-ship use. We're going to fill space with so much metal that nothing can get through." The human ships began reprogramming their defensive systems, while the Zephyrian vessels continued their approach. It was a race between human adaptability and alien determination, with the lives of thousands hanging in the balance. Martinez worked frantically at his station, connecting targeting computers and adjusting firing solutions. The point defense guns were smaller than the main railguns, but they could fire much faster and carried thousands of rounds of ammunition. Each round was only the size of a human fist, but they would be moving fast enough to punch through alien hull plating. "Ready, Captain," Martinez announced. "All point defense systems linked and targeted." Morrison looked at the tactical display one more time. The lead Zephyrian ship was 90 seconds from ramming the Vengeance. Its hull was already glowing from the heat of atmospheric friction as it passed through the thin gas clouds that filled interstellar space. "All ships commence point defense barrage," Morrison ordered. Every human vessel opened fire with their defensive systems. Thousands of small projectiles filled the space ahead of the charging alien ships like a metallic wall of death. The rounds were too small to show up individually on sensors, but their combined effect was devastating. The lead Zephyrian ship ran into the debris field at nearly maximum velocity. Its shields were designed to deflect energy weapons and large projectiles, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer number of impacts. Hundreds of small rounds punched through the energy barriers and began tearing apart the ship's hull. Morrison watched in satisfaction as the alien vessel began breaking apart under the concentrated fire. Pieces of its superstructure flew away as the point defense rounds found critical systems. Within seconds, the ship was tumbling out of control, trailing atmosphere and debris. But the other two Zephyrian vessels adjusted their courses to avoid the worst of the barrage. They spread out and came at the human fleet from different angles, making it impossible to concentrate all the defensive fire on both targets. The UNS Boston took the first impact. The damaged destroyer had been limping along with reduced speed and could not maneuver away from the charging alien ship. The collision was brief and violent. Both vessels were destroyed instantly in a flash of light that could be seen from the New Denver colony. The final Zephyrian ship continued toward the Vengeance with suicidal determination. Admiral Vexithara himself was aboard that vessel, and Morrison realized the alien commander intended to die taking Admiral Phillips with him. It was the kind of honorable death that military officers dreamed about, but Morrison had no intention of allowing it. "Amy, open a channel to Admiral Phillips," Morrison ordered. Admiral Phillips' face appeared on the main screen. His ship was taking heavy damage and his bridge was filled with smoke, but his expression remained calm. "What is it, Jake?" "Sir, request permission to ram that ship before it reaches you." Phillips shook his head. "Negative, Captain. The Defiance is needed for the evacuation. We'll handle this." Morrison felt frustrated, but he could not disobey a direct order. He watched helplessly as the final Zephyrian ship approached the Vengeance with death in its wake. Then something unexpected happened. The alien ship suddenly began to slow down. Its engines were still firing, but it was decelerating rather than maintaining its ramming course. At first, Morrison thought it might be battle damage, but then he realized what was actually happening. Navigation Officer Karen Wells looked up from her station with amazement in her voice. "Captain, the alien ship is caught in a gravity well." "One of their own mines is pulling them off course," Morrison understood. The Zephyrians had deployed gravity mines throughout the battle area to crush human ships, but they had forgotten that gravitational fields affected everything equally. Their own vessel was being drawn toward one of their weapons, and there was nothing they could do about it. Admiral Vexithara's ship fought against the artificial gravity, but it was too close to escape. The vessel was pulled inexorably toward the mine until it crossed the critical threshold. Morrison turned away as the alien ship was crushed by forces that no hull could withstand. The battle area fell silent except for the background radiation of destroyed ships and the fading energy signatures of failed systems. The Zephyrian fleet that had approached with such confidence was gone. 12 advanced warships had been defeated by primitive humans using weapons that should not have worked. Morrison slumped in his command chair as the reality of what had happened began to sink in. They had won. Against all odds and conventional wisdom, the human fleet had defeated the most advanced military force in known space. But more importantly, they had bought time for the civilians to escape and proved that humans belonged among the stars. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The Zephyrian fleet appeared on the long-range sensors exactly when predicted. 12 massive warships moving in perfect formation like deadly birds of prey. Their hulls gleamed with polished metal and energy fields that bent light around them. Each ship was twice the size of the largest human vessel and carried enough firepower to glass a planet. Captain Morrison watched the tactical display as the enemy approached. Admiral Vexathera was taking his time showing off his superior force. The alien ships moved with mechanical precision that spoke of centuries of military tradition. They had done this dance so many times that victory was just another routine operation. Range to target? Morrison asked. Lieutenant Commander Grant checked her instruments. 2 million kilometers and closing, Captain. They're maintaining standard attack formation. No surprises so far. Morrison nodded. The humans had studied every Zephyrian battle recording they could find. The aliens always attacked the same way because it always worked. Energy shields, forward plasma cannons charging an overwhelming firepower, concentrated on the largest enemy targets first. It was efficient and effective and boring in its predictability. Chief Engineer Rivera approached from his station. Captain, the railguns are ready, but I'm worried about heat buildup. We've never fired them this rapidly in actual combat. The cooling systems might not keep up. How many shots before we have problems? Morrison asked. Maybe 20 from each gun before we risk damaging the magnetic coils, Rivera replied. After that, we'll need time to cool down or we could lose the weapons completely. Morrison did quick math in his head. The Defiance had 4 main railguns, and if they could only fire 20 shots each before overheating, that gave them 80 chances to hit something important. It would have to be enough. Communications Officer Amy Thompson looked up from her station. Captain Admiral Phillips is requesting final status reports from all ships. Morrison activated his command circuit. Defiance ready for combat. All weapons loaded and all systems green. Similar reports came from the other 11 human ships. The UNS Vengeance, UNS Liberty, UNS Boston, and 9 others. Each ship carried a crew that knew they were probably about to die but was determined to make it count. Admiral Phillips' voice came through clearly. All ships, this is Phillips. Remember, we're not trying to win today, we're trying to buy time. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and make them think twice about what humans can do. If we can delay them for even an hour, we've done our job. The Zephyrian fleet continued its approach. At 1 million kilometers, they began charging their plasma cannons. The energy buildup was visible on human sensors as bright points of light gathering power. Each cannon could fire bolts of superheated gas that could vaporize anything they hit. Morrison made his decision. All hands, battle stations. Amy signaled the fleet we're beginning our attack run. The 12 human ships changed course and accelerated directly toward the enemy. It looked like a suicide charge, and maybe it was. But humans had learned something about space combat that the aliens had forgotten. Sometimes the best defense was a good offense, especially when you had nothing left to lose. The Zephyrian formation reacted to the human approach by tightening their defensive positions. Their energy shields brightened as more power flowed to the defensive systems. Admiral Vexathera was probably laughing at the primitive humans charging straight into his guns. At 500,000 kilometers, the aliens opened fire. Brilliant streams of plasma reached across space toward the human ships. The bolts moved at the speed of light, but space was big, and the human ships were small, fast targets. Most of the shots missed, but 3 struck the UNS Boston. Morrison watched in horror as the plasma ate through the Boston's armor like acid through paper. But something strange happened. The ship kept coming. Its hull glowed white-hot in places and atmosphere vented from damaged sections, but the ship did not break apart or explode. Captain, the Boston is still operational, Grant reported with surprise in her voice. Heavy damage, but still fighting. Morrison realized what had happened. Human ships were built differently than alien vessels. Instead of exotic materials and energy fields, they used simple steel and ceramic armor designed to absorb and distribute heat. The plasma weapons were devastating, but they were not the instant kill shots the Zephyrians expected. All ships continue the attack, Morrison ordered. Close to optimal range and prepare to fire. The human fleet reached 200,000 kilometers from the enemy. At this range, their railguns would be most effective. The tungsten penetrators would have maximum velocity and minimum flight time. If they were going to surprise the aliens, this was their chance. All batteries target the lead ship, Morrison commanded. Fire. The Defiance shuddered as all 4 railguns fired simultaneously. Magnetic coils accelerated tungsten slugs to 30% of light speed and hurled them across space toward the Zephyrian flagship. The other human ships fired at the same moment, creating a wall of kinetic projectiles, moving faster than anything the aliens had ever faced. The tungsten penetrators struck the Zephyrian energy shields in a fraction of a second. For centuries, those shields had stopped every attack ever made against them. Energy weapons, exotic particles, and conventional missiles had all been deflected or absorbed. The shields were considered absolutely impenetrable. The kinetic rounds went through them like they were not there. Morrison watched his tactical display in amazement as 12 tungsten slugs punched through the flagship's defenses and tore into its hull. The alien ship shuddered under the impact, and pieces of debris flew away from the impact points. Secondary explosions lit up its interior as the penetrators found something important. But the flagship was not the only target. Every human ship had fired, and every shot had found its mark. The Zephyrian formation suddenly found itself under attack from weapons that their defenses could not stop. 3 escort cruisers exploded outright as tungsten penetrators found their power cores. 2 more began spinning out of control with massive hull breaches. Admiral Vexithara's confident formation dissolved into chaos. Ships that had never taken damage in 2 centuries of warfare suddenly found themselves crippled by primitive kinetic weapons. The impossible had happened, and the aliens did not know how to respond. Reload and fire again, Morrison ordered. His crew worked frantically to load fresh penetrators while the railgun coils cooled. They had maybe 15 seconds before the aliens recovered from their shock and returned fire. The second human volley was even more devastating than the first. Now that the aliens knew the human weapons could penetrate their shields, they tried to maneuver away, but space battles were not fought at close range. The tungsten slugs crossed the distance between fleets before the Zephyrian ships could react. 2 more alien vessels died in balls of fire as their reactors overloaded. The flagship took another 4 hits and began listing to one side as its gravity generators failed. In less than 2 minutes, the most advanced fleet in the galaxy had lost almost half its ships to weapons the aliens considered obsolete. Morrison felt a moment of fierce satisfaction. Humans had just proved that sometimes old ideas worked better than new ones, and sometimes the simplest solution was the right one. The Zephyrians were learning that technological superiority meant nothing if you did not understand your enemy. But the battle was far from over. The remaining alien ships were recovering from their shock and beginning to fight back with everything they had. The stars looked different when you knew war was coming. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance and watched the empty space ahead. His ship was moving through the void toward a battle that everyone said humans could not win. The alien races had been fighting wars among the stars for thousands of years, while humans had barely learned to leave their own planet. The Galactic Council meeting 3 months ago had been a disaster. The Zephyrian Empire had declared war on the Terran Federation, and the other alien races had simply watched. Some had even seemed pleased that the newcomers would finally be put in their place. Humans had been in space for only 50 years, and many aliens thought they did not belong among the established powers. Morrison walked to his command chair and sat down. The bridge was smaller than those on alien ships, but it felt right to him. Everything was built for humans by humans. The controls were where human hands could reach them easily. The displays showed information the way human minds could understand it quickly. No fancy holographic projections or mental interfaces like the aliens used. Just simple screens and buttons that worked. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant looked up from her tactical station. She had been studying enemy fleet movements for weeks. Her dark hair was pulled back and her green eyes showed the strain of too many sleepless nights. She was the best tactical officer in the human fleet, and Morrison trusted her completely. Captain, the Zephyrian Advance Fleet is 6 hours out from New Denver Colony, she reported. Admiral Phillips wants us to delay them as long as possible, while the civilians evacuate. Morrison nodded. The plan was simple in the way that desperate plans always were. The human task force would engage the enemy and try to buy time. No one expected them to actually win. The Zephyrian fleet had energy shields that had never been broken in recorded galactic history. Their plasma weapons could destroy entire asteroids. They had been conquering star systems since before humans discovered fire. The Defiance was one of 12 human warships heading to what everyone called a hopeless battle. Admiral Roy Phillips commanded from the UNS Vengeance, but Morrison knew each captain would have to make their own decisions once the fighting started. Space battles happened too fast for detailed commands from headquarters. Chief Engineer Carlos Rivera appeared at Morrison's side. He was a short man with quick hands and an even quicker mind. He had helped design the Defiance and knew every system on the ship better than anyone. "All weapons ready, Captain," he said. "The railguns are loaded with tungsten penetrators and we have full power to all systems." Morrison smiled at that. Railguns were hardly new technology, but humans had made them work better than anyone thought possible. While aliens had moved to exotic energy weapons centuries ago, humans had kept improving kinetic systems. A tungsten slug moving at a good fraction of light speed could do terrible damage to anything it hit. The problem was hitting targets that had shields designed to stop exactly that kind of attack. Communications Officer Amy Thompson turned from her station. She was young for such an important position, but she had earned it through skill and dedication. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian Fleet Commander." "Put it on screen, Amy." The main display flickered and showed an alien face that looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. Admiral Vexithera had commanded Zephyrian fleets for over 200 years. His scaled skin was dark green and his eyes were the color of old gold. When he spoke, his voice carried the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. "Human vessels, you are outmatched and outgunned," he said. "Your primitive weapons cannot penetrate our defenses. Surrender now and we will allow your civilians to evacuate safely. Continue on your current course and we will destroy you all." Morrison looked around his bridge. Every face showed the same expression. They were scared, but they were not backing down. These were people who had volunteered to serve knowing they might die far from home defending colonies they had never seen. Amy sent a reply. Morrison said, "Tell Admiral Vexithara that we appreciate his offer, but we'll have to decline. Human ships don't retreat from fights." Amy typed the message and sent it. A few minutes later, the alien admiral appeared on screen again. This time he looked annoyed rather than confident. "Very well, humans. Your courage is admirable, but it will not save you. We will arrive at New Denver in 6 hours. Use that time to prepare for your deaths." The transmission ended and the bridge fell silent. Morrison stood up and activated the ship-wide communication system. His voice would reach every compartment and every crew member on the Defiance. "This is the captain speaking. In a few hours we're going to fight the most advanced fleet in the galaxy. They have better shields, better weapons, and more experience than we do. They think we can't win, and maybe they're right. But we're not fighting to win today. We're fighting to give 10,000 civilians time to escape to safety. We're fighting to show the galaxy that humans don't back down from bullies. And we're fighting because it's the right thing to do." He paused and looked out at the stars again. "The Zephyrians have won every battle they've fought for 2 centuries. But they've never fought humans before. They don't know that we fix things with spare parts and determination. They don't know that we solve problems by thinking differently than everyone else. And they definitely don't know that sometimes the oldest and simplest weapons work better than the fanciest new ones." Morrison could hear cheering from other parts of the ship. These people believed in what they were doing, even if they might die doing it. That was what made humans dangerous in ways the aliens had never imagined. "All hands to battle stations," he announced. "Let's go show the galaxy what humans can do." The crew moved with practiced efficiency to their combat positions. The Defiance turned toward the approaching enemy fleet and increased speed. Behind them, 11 other human ships did the same. They were heading into a battle they could not win against an enemy they could not match. But they were going anyway, because that was what humans did when innocent people needed protection. The Zephyrians were about to learn that technological superiority meant nothing without the will to use it properly, and humans had never lacked will. 6 months after the Battle of New Denver, Captain, Morrison stood in the great assembly hall of the Galactic Council on Nexus Prime. The massive chamber could hold representatives from 1,000 different species, and today it was completely full. Every major civilization in the galaxy had sent delegates to hear what the humans had to say. Morrison wore his dress uniform with the new medals that had been created specifically to honor the crew of the Defiance. The Victory Star hung from a blue ribbon, while the Galactic Service Cross gleamed on his chest. But the decorations felt strange to him. He was a soldier, not a politician, and he would rather have been aboard his ship. The UNS Defiance sat in orbit above Nexus Prime alongside vessels from dozens of alien civilizations. But now those ships looked different. Many carried new weapons systems that combined energy and kinetic technologies. The human approach to warfare had revolutionized military thinking across the galaxy in just half a year. Ambassador Helen Carter introduced Morrison to the assembled delegates. She was a diplomat who understood the importance of what had happened at New Denver. The battle had changed more than military doctrine. It had shifted the balance of power in the galaxy and opened new possibilities for cooperation between species. Morrison approached the speaking platform and looked out at hundreds of alien faces. Some were familiar from his studies of galactic politics. Others belonged to species he had never seen before. All of them were here because 12 human ships had done something that was supposed to be impossible. Honored delegates, Morrison began. 6 months ago, my ship and 11 others fought the Zephyrian fleet near New Denver Colony. We were not supposed to win that battle. Every tactical analysis said we would be destroyed within the first hour of combat. The Zephyrians had superior technology, superior numbers, and centuries of experience. He paused and looked around the chamber. But we did win. Not because we were better soldiers or because we had secret weapons. We won because we thought differently about an old problem. We used simple kinetic weapons against energy shields that had stopped every attack for 1,000 years. We turned gravitational mines into weapons accelerators. We adapted faster than our enemies could respond. A delegate from the hegemony stood up. The tall alien had skin like polished crystal and eyes that glowed with inner light. Captain Morrison, your victory was impressive, but it was also fortunate. The Zephyrians underestimated you. That will not happen again, Morrison nodded. You're right, Ambassador. No one will underestimate humans again. But that's not the point. The point is that we all need to stop underestimating each other. Every species brings something unique to the galaxy. The Zephyrians had powerful shields, but they had forgotten how to defend against kinetic weapons. We had simple railguns, but we didn't understand energy manipulation. Together, we're stronger than we are apart. Another delegate spoke up. This one belonged to a species that looked like walking trees with golden bark. What are you proposing, Captain? Cooperation, Morrison replied. The war with the Zephyrian Empire ended when we proved that their tactics could be defeated. But instead of demanding surrender, we offered alliance. Admiral Vexithera's replacement, Admiral Kexmoral, is now working with our engineers to develop new defensive systems. The Zephyrians are teaching us about energy shields while we teach them about kinetic weapons. Morrison activated a holographic display that showed the latest joint military exercises. Human and Zephyrian ships flew together in formations that would have been unthinkable before the battle. The alien vessels now carried railguns as backup weapons, while human ships had been fitted with basic energy shields. This is the future, Morrison continued. Not one species dominating all others, but all species working together. The humans brought new ideas about warfare, but we learned those ideas from studying problems differently. Every species here could do the same thing. A representative from the ancient Eternal Republic rose to speak. The aliens were old even by galactic standards, and their technology was beyond anything humans could understand. Young Captain, your words are wise, but cooperation requires trust. How do we know humans will not use their new influence to dominate others? Morrison had expected this question. It went to the heart of why the galaxy had watched the Zephyrian attack without intervening. Everyone was afraid of being conquered by a more powerful neighbor. Because that's not who we are, Morrison replied. Humans have been fighting wars among ourselves for thousands of years. We learned that conquest never brings lasting peace. The strongest nations on Earth became strong by building alliances, not by crushing enemies. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to help protect it. He gestured toward the viewing ports that showed ships from many species working together in orbit. Look at what we've accomplished in just 6 months. Joint research stations, mixed crews, shared technology. Species that have been enemies for centuries are now allies because they have a common goal. The debate continued for hours as delegates asked questions and raised concerns. Morrison answered each one patiently, explaining how human ideas about cooperation could benefit everyone. He told them about the joint research facility on Mars where scientists from 12 species were developing new technologies. He described the mixed crews training, aboard human ships and learning to work together, despite their differences. But the most important moment came when Admiral Kexmoral of the Zephyrian Empire spoke for the first time. The alien commander had replaced the disgraced Vexithara and brought a new perspective to his people's military doctrine. "Honored delegates," the Admiral said in accented but clear Standard Galactic. "6 months ago I considered humans to be primitive barbarians unworthy of our attention. Today I call Captain Morrison my friend and ally. The humans defeated us not through treachery or luck but through innovation and courage. They could have demanded our surrender and taken our territory. Instead, they offered partnership." The Admiral's words carried weight because everyone knew the Zephyrians had been the most militaristic species in the galaxy. If they could change their perspective, then anyone could. Morrison concluded his speech by announcing the formation of the Joint Defense Initiative. It would be a voluntary alliance of species committed to protecting each other and sharing military technology. Any civilization could join regardless of their size or technological level. All they had to do was promise to help defend others and accept help in return. Within a week, 47 species had requested membership in the new alliance. The humans had not only survived their first galactic war, they had started a revolution in how civilizations related to each other. Captain Morrison returned to the Defiance feeling satisfied but not triumphant. He knew that changing minds was harder than winning battles and there would be many challenges ahead. But for the first time since humanity had left Earth, he felt confident about their future among the stars. The galaxy was a big place with room for everyone. All it took was the wisdom to work together and the courage to try new approaches to old problems. Humans had brought both to the galactic community, and in return they had found their place among the stars. The UNS Defiance departed Nexus Prime with ships from 6 different species as escorts. They were heading to the joint training facility in the Alpha Centauri system, where crews from across the galaxy would learn to fight together. It was a new kind of fleet for a new kind of future. Morrison stood on his bridge and watched the stars wheel slowly past. Somewhere out there, other challenges waited, but he was no longer worried about facing them alone. The humans had proven that cooperation was stronger than conquest, and that innovation was more powerful than tradition. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what Morrison had hoped for.